is our obligation to inform and alert the American people, to make certain that they possess all the facts that they need and understand them as well, the perils, the prospects, the purposes of our program, and the choices that we face.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? Good morning from California. Good morning from probably Ohio, where my next guest is sitting. And you have joined the Ultra MK podcast, where together we are reversing the narrative. And on today's show, I'm honored to have a guest on who I've been actually acquainted with recently in person, but I've actually been watching his work since the 2024 election cycle. And that's where I was really inspired by what he had been doing with people like Mike Lindell and some other folks who are patriots by nature and were able to put their resources together to try to expose information that we as the people were just trying to find out what really happened. And so today on our show, I have a good friend of mine now, Dr. Doug Frank. And Dr. Doug Frank is an amazing man with an amazing background. And I'm hoping today you guys will get a chance to get to know him a little bit. So how you doing today, Doug?
Good to see you, Matt. It
Good
was
to
a
see
pleasure
you.
meeting you at the Rev 17 conference, getting to know you and seeing you in action. I think you have a future in media.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I just love it. I love serving people, and with the cause that you and I are both involved in with the Piece of Heaven. Like, to me, it's just it's an honor to be a part of something so important and so needed in our country today.
Yes.
But yeah, doing things like the conference Rev 17, man, that was a lot of fun. And when you have fun, you don't really work a day in your life, right?
Well
So
said.
So, anyways, folks, for those who don't know, Dr. Doug Frank, in the description, below, we're going to put all of his contact information and links where you can find more on him. And so I'm sure you're going to learn a lot in this episode today. But Doug, let's kind of take people back in time into the time machine. Let's turn on the flux capacitor and get into our DeLorean and see where we were as a country. We could talk 2020 briefly, because that shocked that shocked a lot of people that were watching mainstream news sources in order to get polling and information of what they thought was going to be the outcome of the 2020 election. Well, I guess first let's go back to your background a little bit. So I do want to share a quick slide just to kind of show people, just really quick, since this is the first time on this show, what your resume looks like, just so they know that you kind of know what you're talking about when it comes to research and finding out, numbers and statistics and data points. So can you see my screen here?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got my periodic table bow tie on there.
Yeah, so that's one thing I noticed about you is you got awesome bow ties that people will never forget anytime you walk into the room. So that's pretty cool. So Dr. Douglas G. Frank has approximately 6 peer-reviewed scientific publications, including feature and cover articles in the leading scientific journals in the world, like Science, Nature, and help me with that word, Doug.
That's Naturwissenschaft, and it's German for natural science.
Oh, very cool.
Mhm.
During his graduate and postdoctoral work, he discovered and developed a new type of microscopy capable of producing three-dimensional images of molecules resting on metal surfaces. This gave him internal credibility in the area of low-energy electron diffraction, known as LEED, and Auger electron spectroscopy.
Spectroscopy and microscopy. Yeah.
Yeah, and his work is prominently featured in college textbooks and handbooks on the subjects. So that's just a little bit about him. I mean, there's so much more about his, his education level and everything that he's been doing his life. But that's a really good, that's a really interesting part of the world to be operating in. Doug, what led you into this type of scientific work?
Since I was in junior high school, I knew I was a physicist. was raised on an Angus ranch in Northern California. And one day I was driving the hay truck. You know, when you're working out in the country, you get to drive the heavy equipment when you're 14. And so I was driving the hay truck downtown to pick up grain or something. I don't remember. And as I drove past the public library, they had a whole bunch of books out in front of the library that nobody ever checked out. And so they were getting rid of them. And so I can't ever pass up a book. So I pulled the hay truck over and I got my overalls on and I'm going through the library books. And lo and behold, I found the Feynman lectures on physics. And they were sitting there. Nobody ever checked them out. And they're like, that 3-volume set is worth about $1,500 today, but I only paid about a dime a piece for those. But anyway, I read those that summer of 8th grade, and I've never been the same. I knew I was a physicist ever since.
Wow.
And so that my mom was also a chemist, so I was naturally bent towards science. And so, you know, I knew I was going to be in science. I just didn't know for sure how I was going to do that. And then when I got to college, my first year in college, I was taking differential equations, and I got addicted to differential equations. I know that's weird, but I did. And Fourier transforms. And once I had those two concepts under my belt, I'm also a computer guy. I was one of the first 300 people on the internet. So I was building computers. You know, I'm sorry, I was one of those guys down at Radio Shack. That's where the geeks hung out when I was a kid.
I remember that place. That place was so cool.
And so I was one of those geeks. And, you know, I was very into all that. And I began modeling elections. In fact, the first election I modeled was 1980. For Reagan's first term, and I voted. That was my first time to vote too. And I also began modeling epidemics then. And the AIDS epidemic was big at that time in San Francisco. It was an hour south of where I lived on the farm. So I began modeling elections and epidemics. What does that sound like?
Interesting.
And right off the bat. And so my whole academic career, not only was I doing my physics, but I was also modeling. And when I would teach my classes, my pedagogy would be that I would always make the students apply their math and science to real life situations. So every time an epidemic would happen in the world, I would require my students to model it and make predictions. And lo and behold, that's what happened with COVID. I was modeling COVID all through 2020. It was one of the most popular websites on Facebook. During COVID, people would come to my website to see how many people are going to die in their county that week. I mean, it's morbid, but I had all the math. I had it down to the gnat's eyelash. I could tell you in every county in America and in 30 countries. So that kind of made me popular. Now, I predicted every election since 1980 as well, including the 2016 election. I predicted Trump 13 months in advance. And people were like, what? How can you predict that? There's 17 people in the primary. Nope. All the math was like, I had, once you get the math dialed in, you can make really good predictions. And I had all the math dialed in. But the first election I missed was 2020. And when it happened, I was like way off. And I'm like, I don't understand this. There's something not right about this, but I really didn't know what to do. And I was really busy. So I just wasn't spending a whole lot of time on it. Then the state of Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano, the senator there, he asked this legislature there for an audit of the 2020 election, and I was invited to be part of the team of 6 people that did the audit in Pennsylvania, and I was given full access to everything I wanted to see. So I got behind the scenes look at all the election systems, all the registration systems, and lo and behold, I found huge amounts of fraud in that state, and I was expecting Pennsylvania to decertify their election because of that, and they didn't. So that was a political lesson for me. I joke about it. They call it political science, but it ain't science. If it was science, I'd be great at it. Politics is not my thing, but I'm learning it.
Yeah, and I'm sure it probably bugged you to no end when all of the talking points were trust the science, and they were just pushing all that out all the time. And you being a data guy, probably thinking like, this isn't right. People shouldn't just comply to trust a few talking heads on the television screen about trusting science. So, and I do stand corrected, folks. I did say earlier the 2020 election was not with Hillary Clinton and President Trump. That was the 2016 election.
Right.
I cannot believe 9 years has already gone by.
I know.
It just feels like time is just speeding up faster.
Wait till you're 64. They're
Then
just
I'm
a
really
baby.
gonna say that. Yeah, I
Wait till
know.
it's shocking how fast it goes. I've been, I remember telling my wife in 2020 when I did the Pennsylvania audit, "Hey, honey, I'm going to set aside my income for 6 months. We're going to save the country, and then I'll be back to the work." That's 4.5 years ago. Okay, and it's
She's
like
like, honey, what are you talking about?
exactly. Fortunately, I have a great marriage. My wife and I have been married 43 years, and we
Oh,
have
that's
three beautiful
awesome.
kids in their 20s. And my wife sees this as my calling. So, and she's delighted. And she just recently said, "I'm so delighted you clearly found your calling," and I believe I have. So I'm really, like you say, it's not work if you love it.
That's
And
true.
as I've been traveling the country working on elections, I came across all of this sex trafficking stuff, which you and I have talked about. And so
Hmm.
I'm on the board of Peace of Heaven, and boy, I've been working hard on that. So I'm doing things I love, but they're valuable, important things for eternal consequences, kind of thing. So I'm really
Hmm.
happy. Nobody's
Yeah.
paying me, but I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah.
It'd be
Well,
nice to make a living. People chip in as I travel, and they pass the hat, and that helps me pay for my plane tickets and things. But I'm not poor. I'm not rich, but I don't have a mortgage, and my wife works, so I'm able to make ends meet
yeah.
this way. Mhm.
Yeah, you found that balance, and God knows who you are, and He knows what you're capable of, Doug. I think He
Amen,
knows
brother.
He knows all of us better than we know ourselves,
That's right.
and that is your calling. And I'm so glad that you are a part of history. And from my position, ever since I saw you standing in, I think you were somewhere in Pennsylvania when all of those shenanigans were going on, and
Oh
that's when
yeah.
I first saw you involved in election systems and election
Hmm.
exposure and trying to bring everything out. So I believe
Yes,
that God has been using you to try to get others to join you in your effort and in this movement to take their power back. So
I agree.
let's rewind. Let's go back to 2020. So earlier you had just mentioned to me that you have some statistics or some information that might be a little controversial in some of the patriot movements when it comes to election results. And what were you able to find from that election versus, let's say, from 2020 to the most recent one, 2024? What was so fascinating from what you found?
Well, Um, yes, I think you're talking about when I talk about the 2024 election, I tell people that Trump didn't win. And people are, "What? What do you mean he didn't win? Of course he won. He's the president." And I'm like, "Nuh-uh. He didn't win, and I've got the data to back it up." And what it basically boils down to is I give this simple analogy. If you show up for a football game and the opposing team shows up and they're all on crutches, you know, you didn't win that football game. The opponents lost it. And if you recall in March of 2024, President Trump was going around telling everybody, "We're going to make the election too big to rig," right?
Hmm.
Well, I have the returns in every state, and I can tell you the number of ballots that were collected in every state that were voting for Trump. And I'm telling you, he didn't make it too big to rig. He just basically held his own. If you allow for population, he didn't increase. He stayed right the same in 2024 as he did in 2020. So no change, in other words. He held his own. But on the Democrat side, Kamala lost 10 million ballots nationally. And it's not just in one state, it's like across the board. Every state, she plummeted in every state. So the Democrats didn't turn out for her. They didn't vote her. She didn't turn out her own base. And so, and I can show you all the graphs for that. And I have, longer explanations on my YouTube channel. We can dive
Hmm.
into that if you want. But basically, it boils down to she was a dud for a candidate, and she didn't even turn out her own base. And there was still a lot of cheating, just like there was in 2020. But her own base was so unmotivated that she couldn't make up the difference. I mean, in California alone, she lost 3.5 million ballots. Think about that. Three and a
Wow.
half million fewer ballots in 2024 than Biden got in 2020. And so it was a loss. The Democrats lost it. The Republicans didn't win it. And
So,
go
so do
ahead.
you, do you know if people ended up switching their party at all in 2024? Do you have any data on that? Like, if was there was there Democrats that were switching to Republican to vote for Trump? Very
Not
much.
very little of that.
Mm,
Very little of that. Mostly the Democrats just didn't show up.
wow.
They just did, they weren't motivated by Kamala, so they just didn't turn out. And I mean, I don't like percentages because percentages means you have to know what the denominator means.
Hmm.
The hard numbers. The hard numbers is Trump basically matched if you account for population. He actually went up about 2.5%, 3%, but that's the population growth. So he just basically tracked population. He didn't change, whereas Kamala plummeted across the board all around the country. So they just didn't turn out for her.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
And they couldn't smuggle illegal voters in fast enough through the
That's
open
right.
borders.
And they did smuggle in a lot. And, one of the people say, well, are you sure they didn't stop the cheating this time? Yeah, I'm sure, because we have tons of cheating all over the country. We're a different country now than we were 4 years ago. I've got teams in states, in half the states, I've got teams right now finding fraud left and right in the 2024 election. There's plenty of fraud to go around. So they didn't stop the fraud. The Democrats just didn't turn out, and they couldn't fraud enough to
Yeah.
make it up.
Did what was the 2020 election really where you learned the most about how fraudulent the system was overall, based on tactics and things that you were finding both internally in our country on, ballot mules and people drop boxes because they were using COVID, and all these other
Yes.
camouflage, in order to hide some of their tactics, and mail trucks dumping ballots into ravines and all
Yes.
that crazy stuff. In addition to, from what I remember, especially with watching the cyber symposium that you guys had put together.
Yeah, I was the MC for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really eye-opening to me, and because our election machines, voting machines are connected to the internet.
Yep.
There's so much controversy surrounding that stuff, people being
Yeah.
sued about it.
Yep.
But there had been some overseas shenanigans happening from some other nations, and
Yes.
so was 2020 really the big eye-opening election for you, or did you already have suspicions?
Honestly, I didn't have a suspicion. I mean, I was assuming there's always at least a little fraud in every election, but since I was able to predict everything, I didn't really think a whole lot about it. But when I missed 2020 by such a huge margin, the odds, for example, in 2016 were 2-1 that Trump was going to win, and and so I predicted that 13 months in advance, and the odds in 2020 were 20-1 that Trump was going to win. So I was telling people, this is like open and shut. This is like a second term of Reagan. It's going to be a landslide. And so when he didn't win, I was shocked, but it was my first miss. And when I was asked by the state of Pennsylvania to look at their elections, I focused on a county called Montgomery County. It's in the bottom right corner of Pennsylvania. And the reason I focused there is because you might remember there were 4 Supreme Court cases from that county, and I was working on 2 of those cases and working with the attorneys. And I'll just tell you one short story, and it'll show you. It was my first big breakthrough, because I was given access to everything. I downloaded all the data for all time for Montgomery County. I had election data back to 1900. And why would I do that? Because I was building a model that I could predict everything, and then looking for deviations from that model, and then exploring those deviations. And I even found a bunch of fraud in Montgomery County in 2012 that way, and then in 2016 as well. So I started finding the fraud. In fact, some of that fraud had even been gone to court and been convicted. They convicted a guy, and I found it independently. So I knew I was on the right track. And then when I got to 2020, I discovered something really interesting. In Montgomery County, 6 weeks before the election, long story, but I'm going to make it short. 6 weeks before the election in 2020, the Montgomery County voter rolls grew from 500,000 to 550,000 in 1 minute. They grew by 10%. 50,000 voters got added. All 50,000 of those voters voted in the 2020 election. And then by the end of December, all 50,000 of them have been removed. And that was, whoa. And how can you add 50,000 people, they all vote, and then they all be removed from the rolls? That didn't make sense. So when I spoke to the Secretary of State about it, she said, I asked her, why are you removing those voters? She says, because they moved away. And I was like, what? I didn't expect that answer. And so I started looking them up, and lo and behold, they had all moved away 10 years earlier. And so what I discovered was that somebody was using old copies of the rolls, putting voters back into the rolls, people that had been already removed and moved away and been removed. They're putting them back in and then stuffing ballots for them. And since I had access to anything I wanted, we downloaded the logs for the state voter roll system. We knew who did that. And we brought all of that to the attention. There were 32 different NGOs in the state, not in government organizations, in the state of Pennsylvania that had access to the voter rolls that were stuffing ballots that way. And we had all the hard evidence. We even knocked on the doors to confirm everything. It was an open and shut case. And I was expecting when we showed that to the legislature that they would decertify the election, but they didn't. And that was like an eye opener to me. And so anyway, that was my first kind of like, whoa, this fraud stuff is real. And here's the evidence. And because I developed all those models and algorithms, I started applying them to other states. I did Florida next, North Carolina, Ohio, and Colorado. And I chose those states because I could download their voter rolls they're available online. And I found the same stuff going on in those states that was going on in Pennsylvania. And that was another shock to me. I was actually looking for controls, because I'm a scientist, and you build controls and then you can find anomalies. And I was shocked. I went down to Florida and met with the Secretary of State there, expected them to go, oh no, we have a huge problem in our elections. And they covered it all up. And so I was shocked at all these Republican states I was going to, they didn't want to fix the elections. That was an eye opener to me. I was expecting, forgive my naivete, Republicans good, Democrats bad. The Republicans are just as bad. This is not a Republican Democrat issue. And I always tell people, in Kentucky, that's a red state, they have 105% of their people registered. And in Oregon, which is a blue state, they have 105% of their people registered. It's not about red
versus blue. No,
it's not. It's about whoever's in control is keeping the control. And that's the problem. Our elections are now centrally controlled in every state. And we have to return the control back to the precinct level, or we'll never be able to fix our elections.
Yeah, it truly is. It's like reprogramming people's minds to know that it's a uniparty. There's a corrupt system of people that are engaged in certain criminality, or they've been compromised in one form, shape, or another, whether it be through money or some operation, or whatever their special interest groups are that are helping them, fund elections and get lobby money and whatever is going on. But I think that more people, are probably as far as America goes, have more in common than they think, but they keep us divided into that kind of football game kind of culture of this team versus that team. So
I think you're right. Yeah.
So that's interesting. I know that in California, where I am, I know that Richard Grinnell has done a lot of work in this state with trying to clean through voter rolls and get rid of a lot of the dead people that were in a lot of our in our precincts in California. He's been doing a lot of work as well. So let's boil that down a little bit, what you just mentioned about like getting each precinct involved in reformation of voting and the systems. How does that all work, and what has been some of the work you guys have been doing?
Well, you brought up Mr. Grinnell, and he has done a lot of work, but I'm sorry to tell you, it has made no difference, because I just posted a whole series of graphs for the entire state of California, county by county, showing the voter rolls in every county. And Judicial Watch even sued Los Angeles County. And you may have noticed EIPCA, the Election Integrity Project of California, also sued LA. And LA was required by the court order to remove 1.2 million people from their 5.3 million voter rolls. And they complied, but within 2 months, their voter rolls were dirty again. The problem, right back up, full again. I can show you the numbers. I have the numbers. So it's like, I'm not just speculating. The problem isn't that the rolls are dirty. The problem is that you're not in control of the voter rolls. And so what happens is there are algorithms running at the state level that keep the voter rolls full and dirty. And no matter how much you clean them, they're going to get dirty again. The only way you're going to be able to clean your voter rolls is to bring them back local and clean them local and keep them local. I'm sorry to say it, but that's just the fact.
Are they doing that electronically, or
Yes.
are they okay? So it's because of like the electronic voting machines
No,
that
no,
they.
no. We're talking about the voter rolls right now.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
The
So
voter rolls are totally corrupted because they're centrally controlled by the state, and
oh wow.
that's the problem. And in the if you run in, people do this all the time. I was just with somebody the other day from Pennsylvania. He worked really hard in a smaller county, Mercer County in Pennsylvania, northwestern Pennsylvania. And he picked me up from the airport. I was giving a presentation there, and he says, "Oh, Dr. Frank, I worked so hard. I removed 600 people from the voter rolls. I sat there with the clerk for 3 days, and we took every one of these people out of the voter rolls." And I said, "Oh, congratulations." I said, "But I just did the statistics on your county, and I didn't see any drop in the numbers. Let's download it and have a look." So we downloaded the recent copy of the rolls, because Pennsylvania updates their rolls every week. And lo and behold, the 600 people that he and the clerk had taken out were back in again. And because he doesn't even think to go back and check 3 months later, because he thinks, okay, we already removed them. The state just put them right back in again, and more actually. And so their rolls were even dirtier 3 months later than they were before he was trying to clean them.
How do you stay motivated to keep doing this stuff if that would you say is the root of the cause of the problem is
Oh yeah,
they can electronically manipulate the voter roll, so
100%.
you could have all these great, people that are getting involved and doing what this
Yeah,
gentleman had done, and then
yeah,
it's like he worked for nothing. I'm sure he was pissed. Like, what the
yeah.
heck? Yeah.
And I hope he's pissed because
Yeah.
because because that'll wake him up. I call them hamster wheels. There are a lot of people in the country on hamster wheels. They're working really hard trying to fix elections, but it's a total waste of time. Like I said, it's not that the voter rolls are dirty that the problem. The problem is you're not in control of the voter rolls. So the key is get control of your voter rolls. And I have a method I teach people how to take back control of your elections. And taking back your voter rolls is the first step. You have to control the voter rolls or you're gone.
And that's on a state level. So there's 50 voter rolls because there's one for every state, right? Or are they having to do that on
You have
are
to
they
do it on your county level. You do it
county
on
level? County
yeah.
level. Okay.
And actually, people, you're too young. Maybe you don't remember, but when I was a boy, and even up till around 1990s, the way we ran our elections is there was a hard copy book. It was called a precinct book, and the person in charge of that book, they would keep them at the clerk's office. There'd be a Republican and a Democrat from the party. They were the precinct captains. It was their job to go around and visit everybody at least once every 2 years and make sure that the precinct was clean. And it's not a hard job if you keep up with it. And typical precinct has 1,000 to 2,000 people in it, and 1,000 doors, and most of them you can tell are the same people. So it's a pretty simple job if you keep up with it, and that was the job of the precinct captains. Well, when NVRA, National Voter Registration Act, happened in 1993, and then HAVA in 2002, we started electrifying, making it electronically, and basically steadily and incrementally took away the local control. And now, if you ask the Secretary of State who's in charge of cleaning the voter rolls, they'll tell you the local clerk. And in your state, they call them the ROV, Registrar of Voters. If you ask the local ROV who's in charge of cleaning the voter rolls, they'll say the state. Nobody's in charge of cleaning the voter rolls, except it was always the precinct captains who were supposed to be cleaning the voter rolls. But we just forgot. And so that's really the key to taking back your elections, is to get local people to re-engage, to wake up and realize, hey, we're losing our country if we don't do this. We've lost our constitutional voice unless we wake up at the precinct level, clean our rolls, and keep our own rolls. Don't use the state rules, use our rolls. You can report to the state regularly so that the state can comply with federal law. According to federal law, they have to keep a centralized database, but you don't have to use their centralized database. You can use your own. And I don't know if you've heard about Shasta County up there, but boy, oh boy, have we made a lot of progress up there. We've got Clint Curtis now as the new ROV, and they're cleaning their. I've got hundreds and hundreds of volunteers working there. They're taking back control of their elections. That's pretty exciting to see. Huntington Beach, also Southern California, they're taking back theirs. So I almost had Fresno, and then I had some problem with the grassroots, and San Joaquin, where we've got convictions in court. So we've got good things happening in the state of California. People are always like, how are you succeeding in California? That's like communist land. The reason is because California is a communist land. You guys are feeling the pain. So it's waking you up.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
when I go to Missouri, people are like, what are you doing here, Dr. Frank? Everything's good here. Well, yeah, you're about to be California. You don't even know it. Okay.
Right.
They're asleep. And so I have to wake them up. When I go out to California, you guys are already awake. I just have to give you a plan and help you move forward.
Yeah, we really are. I would say we're a different breed of conservative. I consider myself conservative, for people who know me.
Yeah.
But we are where we are most tested in this state because they have been so tyrannical.
Yes.
And for those of us who've stayed around to see the change and be a part of this change, it's like we have been put into this pressure chamber where they
Yes.
want to see how far they can push us until
Mhm.
we actually want to do something about it. And that's where it is the front lines. I tell people we're behind, the front
Yes.
lines right now. And
You are.
I've seen so much in my, my 40 years of living that in this state as a native that I'm like, I mean, this is the time that we have to do something about it. And I see Shasta County guys, and they did a documentary called Red, White, and Blueprint, which is very inspiring. I encourage everybody who's watching this to check out Red, White, and Blueprint, because they were able to do some amazing things during COVID to get rid of some really bad county supervisors.
Mhm.
And yeah, in Huntington Beach too, like the mayor down there in Huntington Beach, she's doing amazing work and just standing her ground. And I know so many counties in California that should be red and should be conservative. They've been manipulated. I think,
Yes.
in fact, in the last election cycle, I think we had like 8 or 9 counties flip towards voting for President Trump and versus in 20. Now,
I want
mind
to
you,
correct you. They didn't
okay,
flip for President Trump. Kamala lost him.
okay, sorry, I got to reprogram. Knowing you, Doug,
But
you got
notice that's exactly what's happened is the Republican Party is saying, let's do the same thing again in 2026 because it worked in 2024. Wrong. The Democrats didn't show. You lost 3.5 million Democrat votes.
wow.
3.5 million Democrats did not turn out to vote.
So there's different variables, right? Would you say that there's like obviously the conditions in which citizens are living to where they feel like, okay, either they're going to be involved in that election and actually cast a vote, or they're just going to sit on the sidelines, depending on what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So so there's kind of those variables there. Then there's also the system itself, meaning that there's control over precincts
Yes.
on a county by county level,
Yes.
and then there's voter rolls and those things. So there's different pistons.
There are multiple
firing.
variables. Well said.
Yeah, yeah. So where do we go next then with 2026 right around the corner in midterms? Because I mean, I've been personally involved in California elections, and I've tried to recall Gavin Newsom a couple times already.
How did that work out for you?
I could have swore we recalled that guy, and within minutes they had the results. And I'm like, wait a minute, if they can count recall ballots as fast as they can count presidential ballots, we wouldn't be in a big mess.
Right.
But it's like, oh, it takes 2 weeks to count presidential ballots.
Yeah. Because they're just going to keep counting until it comes out the way they want. Stalin said it doesn't matter who casts the votes. What matters is who counts the votes.
Yeah, so true, dude.
And that's your problem. And so until you take back local control and count your own ballots, you're toast. And that's basically what I'm teaching people, how to do that. It's tricky and it's different. There's a different strategy in every state, how to take back the local control. There are nuances. Different states have different laws. And so you have to kind of strategize your way through that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit. You mentioned earlier in this episode about the same people involved in manipulating elections have been connected to some of the trafficking problems in our country. What do you feel comfortable sharing with our audience today?
I can talk about that. So I've given about 1,000 public presentations in the last 4.5 years. I've been on the road a lot. I had 500,000 airline miles in 2022, for example. I mean, I was jumping around a lot. These days, I don't jump around so much. I'll like stay in one state for 5 days and then another state for 5 days. So I'm not flying quite as much as I used to, but still a lot. I'm typically on the road 2 weeks and then home for a few days, then 2 weeks and home for a few days. Kind of that's my typical pattern. So I have given, I mean, I've got a PowerPoint for every one of those presentations. So I'm not exaggerating. I've got close to 1,000. But the reason I've mentioned that is because I've been all over the country. They call me the Johnny Appleseed of election integrity because it's like I'm everywhere. But I really don't feel like I'm planting seeds as much as I'm cross-pollinating. And I'm interacting with all these people all across. So I have a really good feeling for the grassroots. And I've interacted with people all over the country. And there's just been this interesting pattern that I didn't expect. And you heard me talk about it at Rev 17. God doesn't waste a thing. It's as I'm traveling, I would have expected to be dealing with election issues everywhere I go, of course, because that's what I'm doing. But it seems like every place I go, the subject of trafficking comes up and sex trafficking comes up. And I've been able to visit some of the best places in the country for where they're treating kids that have been trafficked and where they're rescuing kids. And I've spent some time with a federal marshal whose job is to arrest the coyotes and to arrest the enforcers that come up from the cartels to enforce the trafficking. And so I've gotten all this insight over the last several years on this. And the reason it's connected to elections is because it's connected to politics. And here's how it's connected. And I can tell you this short story, and I think it'll kind of illuminate. So in March of 2021, Mr. Lindell discovered my work in Pennsylvania, and he made a movie about me. It's a documentary. It's called Scientific Proof. It's a 1-hour documentary. It was his second documentary. His first documentary was called Absolute Proof. The second documentary, Scientific Proof. It was about me. And his third documentary was called Absolute Interference. And the first half an hour of that is more of my work. So I spent a lot of time with Mike in March of 2021. And when I was with him, you're in studio. We were in this building that had no windows. 10 of us were being filmed. I'm not allowed to say all the people that were in there, but there were big names in there. And then we had 10 Navy SEAL guards, former Navy SEALs. I mean, carrying automatic weapons. So this was like an amazing facility that we're in. But we were basically in lockdown for 3 days. So I spent a lot of time with these Navy SEAL guys, former Navy SEAL guys, and they sat me down and they said, Dr. Frank, you need to change your life, and here's how. And they gave me a whole checklist of things that I was going to need to do because they knew that as I was thrust into the public arena, that I would be persecuted in certain ways. Mm-hmm. And, for example, they said, take all your money out of any national bank, take half of it, put it in local credit unions, and the other half put in some other form, some liquid form, silver, gold, cash, some other form, because the banks are going to cancel you. And they were right. My national banks canceled me. And they said, make sure you've got everything backed up because the FBI is going to take your stuff. And sure enough, the FBI met me at an airport one day and took my cell phone from me. So it's like, this stuff is real. Anyway, they gave me a whole list of checklists. And one of the things on the checklist, they said, as you're on the road, you're never allowed to be alone with a woman. You always have to go out with a group. And at first I was just assuming, well, that's just because, fidelity. And I've been faithful to my wife for 43 years and I'd like to keep it that way. And I like my wife to know that I follow that rule too. They call it the Billy Graham rule. I'm never allowed to be alone with a woman. And I thought that that's what they were saying, but that isn't what they were saying. They were saying, if you're ever alone in a restaurant, you'll get Mickey'd. Your drink will get Mickey'd. Mm-hmm. And then the next day you'll wake up and they'll have pictures of you with children. Mm. Okay, so this is 2021. I'm being told this. There'll be pictures of you with children. Now, just think about that. In the whole sex trafficking thing. Right. That means they have children available to honeypot people, and that's a kind of it took me longer to tell the story than I thought. But the point is, all the way up to the legislative level, we have pictures of legislators with children, and I don't know how many of those guys are real pedophiles And how many of those guys have been
Were set up.
honeypotted and
Yeah.
and set up? The point is, it's pervasive in politics, and it's like you're not allowed to talk about it, that subject, in the legislature. Nobody. It's like the Epstein files. Are you kidding? Those Epstein files are never coming out, and because there are too many powerful people that are on those lists, and it's like nobody wants to tattle on anybody else, because the whole thing is that, if you're exposed, I'm exposed, and everybody's exposed. So I didn't realize when I started this election work how pervasive that was, but it's right up through the system, right up into the legislators, right up into the Congress. It's a shocking situation. So that's why I got kind of
Was that your
primed for
red
the
pill
sex
moment?
trafficking stuff.
Was that your like ultimate red pill moment of knowing the severity of the magnitude of children being involved in operations that the dark side has been using in our country and around the world?
Yeah, and that was I did an event in South Carolina in 2021, and there was a gal named Lindsay Piper Loomis. She held an event there. She was trafficked herself as a young girl, and she brought in. I was there to talk about elections, and she brought in some guy who's an expert at the border, and he had taken her down to the border to talk about sex trafficking, where we bring in children from outside the country. And he talked about all the issues he was dealing with, and he showed pictures of the panty trees. I don't know if you've seen those, the panty trees.
Yeah.
I mean, it just breaks my heart to see that stuff. So at that time in 2021, I was thinking that the sex trafficking issue was primarily bringing children from other countries in. That was my mindset, because that was what I'd been exposed to. But by the end of 2022, I realized, no, there's an entire industry of capturing children within our own country. And I talked about that in Rev 17 as well, where they're taking our own children into the industry as well. And so I think by 2023, I was telling people, our problem in America isn't our elections. Our problem in America is our spiritual depravity. There's this huge appetite and huge demand for child sex trafficking. That's not a healthy society. Okay. And I've done all the, me, I got a graph for everything. I've done all the statistics on abortion, massive amounts of abortion. So we're killing our babies. We're trafficking our children. We're castrating our kids. We defile marriage. It's like all these things. We are in a depraved state. And so really our elections are really a consequence of our depraved state. So by 2023, I was thinking that really I'm not merely working on elections. I'm also working for a spiritual revival. And it's a political revival as well as a spiritual revival. And I'm actually seeing that happening. So if I felt like we were losing ground, you're right. I might become just depressed and not want to do it anymore. But no, we are gaining ground. I mean, look at all the thousands of people that are taking Constitution classes. So it's like people are waking up and engaging, and look at glad tidings are stepping up, and we're and you met Mary Flynn there at Rev 17. People are waking up all around the country to this, and why is it working? From the bottom up. It's not happening from the top down.
Right.
And so there's a spiritual and political revival happening at the grassroots level coming up, and I'm playing a role in that, and I'm happy to do my part, and that's really, I think, how it all connects.
I mean, some people, have been down some rabbit holes, and they've seen things. I mean, I've seen some wild things ever since COVID had us locked down.
Yeah.
Just like WikiLeaks file information and things that were on Hunter Biden's laptop, and things that were on Anthony Weiner's laptop, and it's just like I'm like, I mean, somehow that stuff kind of leaked out for a period of time, and then now you can't really find it. But I know that it really shocked people to the core, and it did to me. And I was like, I can't just sit by and just believe other people are going to fix this. I want to play my part and figure out where I can get involved. And so, because our lives are so short, Doug, like we just talked about time and timelines. It's like we blink and we're another year goes by, and it's like, what do you want to do on this earth while you're here to leave it? Like, you got to leave it better than when you got here, And so, if you could imagine, a fair and honest election system, what would that look like? Would that look like um, blockchain technology? Does that look like old school paper, everything paper? What would that be like in order for both Republicans, Democrats, Independents to feel comfortable like, hey, look, our voice matters, our vote will be counted, and we don't have to wait 3 weeks to a month to know results. We can know as fast as possible. What does that look like?
So the most important thing is transparency and local control. And so, in other words, it needs to be fully auditable, fully inspectable, and it needs to be controlled locally, because that's the only way to make sure that everything is transparent. You know, most people don't realize it, but all of Europe is all on paper. There's no electronic machines in their elections, and they do it. They do their election in one day. It's a national holiday. Everybody shows up. They have ID. They have to show their ID. They vote on paper, and they count it locally at the local precinct and turn in. And we just somehow got convinced as a country that we became enamored with all the technology and thought we could run our elections that way. There's no safe way to run an election if you have electronics involved. I'm there's a door behind me. I have an electronics shop back there. I build electronics. Okay. I don't trust electronics. I've been using computers my whole life. Dude, they are not safe. So anything that's a black box is not okay unless you have full transparency of what's going in and full transparency of what's coming out. You got to be able to compare. And what they're doing to you now in our elections is they're basically saying, we're not going to show you inside the machines, and we're not going to let you look at what's going in and out. So they basically blocked the people out of the election. I tell people, I don't care how you run your election as long as you're running it and you have access to everything. You can vote with M&Ms as far as I'm concerned. As long as you have control and it's fully auditable. So, for example, in Shasta County, every ballot that comes in is going to go under a digital camera, front and back, before it even goes into the machines. And so it's going to be counted, tallied before it goes into the machines. And so then you'll be able to compare the numbers that the machines give with what the camera. So there's no way to the machines can cheat. And no ballots are going to be opened or processed until the polls close. So there's no advanced knowledge, so you don't know how much to cheat or or how to cheat. And then afterwards, everything is transparent, and the local citizens are counting the ballots and processing the ballots. So and we've done all the training already. We've trained the citizens, and we're expecting it to take 8 hours for them to completely manually process that election with full transparency, full auditability. And anybody at home could actually watch it because they're going to be streaming it live. So you could, at home, you could keep your own tallies on the races you're interested in and see how close you are to the final tally. It'll be close because they're not going to be able to cheat because it's all being seen. What most people don't realize, the problem with the machines is that the machines aren't necessarily flipping ballots. I always tell people, it doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. It doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. What matters is how many of the bills are counterfeit. The problem isn't that the machines are flipping ballots. The problem is that the ballots coming in aren't real ballots from real voters. And so you can count them on your head. You can count them with machines. You can count them by hand. You can do recounts. You can recount them as many times as you want. That's not the problem. The problem is you've got counterfeit ballots coming in. And what's happening is in real time, those machines, those tabulators are reporting in real time. I have recordings of this. The machines actually reporting in real time during the elections. There's a nice segment in Mr. Lindell's third movie called Absolute Interference. The last 20 minutes interview a guy. His face is fuzzed out, so you can't see who his identity is, but he's a telecom guy in Georgia. And during their runoff election, he had 5 Raspberry Pi computers sitting on 5 telephone poles recording the machines reporting in real time during the elections. So that's a beautiful example. But we also have, for the 2020 election, recordings on the networks. There's not what people, when they say the machines aren't connected to the internet, they're sort of right. It's not connected to the internet. They're on secure networks, but that aren't secure. So what's happening is the machines are reporting the tally. So during the election, you always know the status. Are we ahead? Are we behind? Oh, gee, we're behind. Let's stuff some more ballots. Well, who do we stuff for? Well, who's voted already? Okay, we'll vote for the people who haven't voted yet. So that's the electronic component. It's telling the bad guys on the outside who hasn't voted and how many ballots you need to stuff. And so that's why in Shasta, nothing is going to be recorded. Nothing is tabulated. They aren't recording which ballots are received, nothing until the polls close. Then everything happens after the polls close, and there are no new ballots added after that. So it's like, boom. That's the safe way to run an election. There's a reason why we had election day and why everything is supposed to be blacked out, opaque until the polls close, and then everything's supposed to be transparent after that.
Yeah.
So how about that for a long answer?
Yeah, no, that's good. It breaks it down so people can get an understanding of really where we can improve and what needs to change.
Yeah.
I can't not talk about election integrity and patriots without bringing up Tina Peters.
Oh yeah.
And some of the work that she had done and all of the consequences that now she's facing because of the corrupt system.
Yeah.
And so what exactly did she do? She took a thumb drive and she was recording the data and took it on a thumb drive. Is that what has them so scared with what she had done?
No, that's not what happened. Let me tell you what happened. So Colorado was one of the first states that I went out and trained people how to do canvassing. We did door-to-door knocking. I was running my algorithms on the Colorado data. We found a bunch of suspect addresses. We went out and knocked on those doors. We found tons of fraud. After 3 days, Sharona Bishop and I sat down in Tina Peters' office, April of 2021. I showed her that fraud, and she was already suspicious something was wrong with her election. She has a movie out there. It's called Selection Code, selectioncode.com. And she was already suspicious because in the municipal election they just had a month or two earlier, a state official called her before her polls closed and congratulated her on how efficiently she ran her election and gave her her final numbers before she even had her final numbers. And she's the one who compiles the final numbers to turn them into the state. So she was already suspicious something is wrong with her election. So then when I brought all this fraud in, a bunch of dead voters, a bunch of people who weren't real voters where ballots had been counted for them, she knew something was wrong. So she says, what do I do, Dr. Frank? And I said, well, we're going to do a lawsuit. So let's back up everything. We're going to do a full audit. Let's get everything backed up that we need to get backed up because we don't want to lose any of the evidence. And she said, well, good thing you mentioned that because Jenna Griswold, the Secretary of State of Colorado, had just sent her a letter telling all the clerks to back up their machines because Dominion was about to do trusted build, it's called. They were going to reprogram the machines and everything was supposed to be backed up that needed to be backed up. So she looked at me, she says, Dr. Frank, how do I back it up? I don't know how. None of us clerks know how to back up our machines. Think about that. None of the clerks in the country I've not yet met one who knows how to back up their machines. How about that? So all these years we've been using machines, nobody's been backing anything up. Okay. So anyway, she says, how do you do it? Do you know how to do it, Dr. Frank? Well, I said, yeah, I could probably do it. I said, but I have a better idea. Because we know that we're going to be prosecuting fraud here. I want to bring in legal counsel to guide us step by step because we don't want to have fruit from the poison tree. You don't go to court with evidence that you collected illegally. So I'm bringing in legal counsel. And I just happen to be in a lawsuit right now in Antrim, Michigan. If you might remember, Antrim, Michigan had that big lawsuit, Bill Bailey case. And my evidence is in that case, and I've been working with that attorney. And while I was doing that, I met a guy who actually backed up the same exact machines that you have. So rather than me learning to do it, let's bring in this guy because he's already experienced and he's been working with this legal counsel already. So rather than me doing it, I'm going to bring in a team. So we brought in a team, and the guy that is going to do the backups, he's a licensed white hat hacker. He's federally licensed. I'm telling you, everywhere I go, sex trafficking is a big deal. He's the one who broke the largest sex trafficking ring in history. He's the one who hacked into their networks. Wow. I'm telling you, everywhere I go, I run into this. But anyway, So he and I are good friends. We spent days in studio together. But anyway, I'm not allowed to say his name. His identity is supposed to be protected, even though it came up in the case. But anyway, he agreed to do the backups on condition of anonymity because of the sex trafficking
Other
work he
cases,
does.
right?
He needs to be anonymous. And so he came in. Each step of the way we had legal advice and legal counsel, and we followed every dot and tittle of the law. And he backed everything up. Then Dominion came in, and when they were there, he supervised with Tina Peters during the backup, and they took pictures and documentation. And then after Dominion left, they did another complete backup of the system. They're called forensic backups. Once you gather the evidence, gather the backup, it can't be changed. It's called a forensic image. And so we got forensic images before, documentation during, and forensic images after. So we have a complete record of what happened. Now, that was fine, and we were ready to do our investigation. We put our team to work, and everything was fine until the state discovered we had those backups. Then the state panicked. Colorado state panicked, and they launched an investigation. They raided her house. They raided Sharona Bishop's house. They raided Linda Bisley's house. And they were panicking because having those forensic images means we can expose all the federal networks. We can expose the BIOS passwords for all the machines in the state, all kinds of stuff. And they were panicked. And so they decided to make an example out of her. And they trumped up a bunch of charges against her. She did nothing illegal. They trumped up a bunch of charges against her and put her in prison. And a lot of people think I set her up, but I didn't set her up. We did everything legally. We were planning to do an investigation. I've done more questionable things than what we did there. Lake County, Ohio, Northern Ohio, we actually hacked into an election, me and my team, during their election, documented that everything was online and networked, prepared a complete report, gave it to Frank LaRose, the Secretary of State of Ohio. He brought in the FBI. He panicked as well. And a couple of weeks later, he made a public statement. He says, "Oh, everybody, I'm sorry to report that there was a security breach during our spring election." This is 2021. There was a security breach, but fortunately, there was no fraud. Well, we didn't do it to do fraud. We did it to prove the whole system was hackable and manipulatable during the election.
Yeah.
But we didn't do that with Tina. We just did backups is all we did with Tina.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was a long answer, but I think I set the record straight for you.
Well, yeah, I think that that whole situation now has been since what, 3.5, 4 years ago. And so people sometimes forget about what had happened there, including myself. And I wanted to know really, because you're the election guy around the country, what really happened there, because I've met Tina, and as a person, I love her. And
she's awesome.
She doesn't give me any, weird vibes at all. Like this is just a normal woman who loves her country. Her son served our country, and she's a Gold Star mom, and she's just an amazing woman who I think that they are, like you said, they're trying to make an example out of. And I pray that she has justice and she can get out of prison, because it's just horrible what they're doing to her. So
it is. Trump says he's going to get her out. He's working on it.
I believe that, and I wouldn't doubt it one bit. When talking to some other folks, though, because they're like using state laws and state jurisdiction on her, it's like it's not like he can just pull strings and have.
He can't just pardon her. I think he's going to declare her a federal whistleblower, and then bring her out under federal whistleblower protection. I think that's what they're working on right now. They also launched the Department of Justice launched an investigation of lawfare into the state of Colorado because of her case.
Wow.
And so my guess is the reason they're doing that is to put pressure on the people. Hey, guess what? We've caught you with your hand in the cookie jar. We've got their own statements saying that they're going to make an example out of her. They're basically saying they don't want any other clerk in the country to question the integrity of the elections anymore, and so they're making an example. I mean, the prosecuting attorney said that on the media, if you can believe it. So, in other words, they deliberately made an example out of her to scare other clerks from looking into their elections. That's lawfare, and they trumped up charges against her. They convicted her of things like influencing a public officer. You know what that it was? When she called to get permission to have somebody supervise.
That's her job.
I know.
Yeah.
Everything she did, she followed the letter of the law, and they just trumped up charges against her and there was one where the identity theft was one of the charges, which she was not convicted of. But the reason why it was identity theft is because she protected the identity of the guy we sent in, and she used another person's badge to let him in and out of the building, so he could go in and out as whenever he needed. And when the state began investigating it, they went to that person, Gerald Wood is his name, and said, "Hey, you were in here when you weren't supposed to be in here." And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And so he turned state's evidence and accused Tina of identity theft, which is not, and she wasn't convicted of that. She just used his badge to let our guy in because she was protecting his identity.
Yeah. Wow. That's wild. Do you feel though that someday will the masses know the scale of all of the fraud of what has been happening, just so that way we can stop being called some conspiracy theorists, and actually, people on the left, people center right will kind of see the truth and the reality? Or is this something that's just going to blow over in the history books that, maybe we'll fix it, but like, are we ever going to go back and see what they've been doing and make 2020 the main example?
I think watch the media closely. Now that Trump's in office, I don't think they were expecting Trump to be in office. Now that Trump's in office, you notice Kash Patel about a month ago announced that they had 1 million fake licenses, driver's licenses, and 1 million fake ballots that the FBI became aware of in October of 2020, before the election, and that was sequestered. The other thing you don't know is people forget this. During 2020 November election, who was president? President Trump.
President Trump.
And the day after the election, he ordered the Justice Department to launch an investigation. There was a huge investigation nationally. Tons of evidence was gathered. And I've been in skiff rooms with some of those federal agents. They are furious because they found fraud all over the place. And then as soon as Biden was inaugurated, all that was, it's like Indiana Jones, that warehouse at the end. All the evidence is put in these boxes. And they're in a crate somewhere. So all this evidence that they found that proved that there was all this fraud is like in crates somewhere, not being investigated. Now, so what's happening, I think right now, I'm answering your question, is those crates are being opened right now and stuff is being brought out. And I don't know whether it's going to be drip, 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 or going to come in big chunks or what. But there's an important. I'm going to put my my speculation hat on now. I'm usually a data guy.
I know you are. I'm going to challenge you a little bit right now.
And I'm going
to bend you. Yeah.
but I'm going to speculate a little bit, and I'm going to connect some dots. And so I can be wrong, but this is my prediction. In 2017, or was it 2018, Trump passed 2 executive orders when he was president, his first term. The 75th executive order he passed was he set up an election integrity committee to investigate the 2016 election, and Pence was made head of that committee. And Pence disbanded that committee within 6 months, said, "Nothing to see here, folks." Okay. Remember, that was the Russia thing. You notice that's all coming back now. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
And so that's a big deal. The second executive order that he did on elections was his 83rd executive order. And it gave him, in a nutshell, gave the president executive authority to overturn any election where there's foreign interference. In other words, Trump could have overturned the 2020 election. He had the evidence of foreign interference, but what he didn't have was people who were awake, and he didn't have even one state that would decertify their election. It's why I was working so hard in Pennsylvania. We were trying to get Pennsylvania to decertify. If they decertified, Trump would have used the executive order. The general can't fight the war by himself. So
that's right.
He needed at least one state to join in with him. All right. Why am I mentioning all that? One of the first executive orders that Biden renewed was that 83rd executive order. In other words, Biden had the executive authority to overturn an election with foreign interference. Well, what do you think is going to happen in 2026? Right now, I think the left is way activated. They hate Trump. Okay, they're very activated, and they're very motivated to turn out. And if you look at the historic patterns, whoever wins the presidential, the other party wins the midterms. So the historic pattern, here I am being a modeler. The historic pattern says we're going to lose the midterm. The numbers also say we're going to lose the midterm. I've done all those numbers. You can watch my YouTube video on that, and I'll show you that 2026, the numbers all say we're going to go down. The patterns say the Republicans are going to lose. Now imagine, Trump even said this. He says he's going to run a third term. He said that. And all this evidence is starting to come out, Kash Patel, a month ago, about foreign interference. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen is we're going to just, as the election approaches, where they're going to be releasing more and more of this foreign interference information, and it's going to basically empower Trump to overturn the election. If it doesn't go the way he wants, he'll say, "Here's the evidence. I'm going to overturn this election." That's my speculation hat.
And you're speculating that for the midterm 2026, not the general 2028, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But he could in 2028 as well, right? He could. And then it would go martial law, and the National Guard would come out and run an election on paper. We'd have purple thumbs and the whole 9 yards. I mean, he could do that. And I think he will. I think he will. I know the guy well enough. He doesn't, he's very self-centered, but
sure.
But when on his deathbed, he wants to lie there and think, "I saved the country." That's all he cares about. He doesn't care about money and power. He's already got all that he wants. He wants to die knowing he saved the country. So he's going to do what he has to do. And my guess is, that's my speculation hat, that's where we're going as a country. Now, that's why I'm working so hard at the grassroots, because I don't think we want just one guy fighting the battle. We need the public to rise up under it. So we're going to have this regular drip, 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 drip education of the public that our elections are being foreign manipulated, so that when the election happens, he can then say, "See, I'm going to overturn that." So that's my speculation hat, but it's an educated speculation.
Do you feel that we'll call it the deep state? Does the deep state actually kind of plant their own candidates, or have their own candidates that they want to run, whether they're Democrat or Republican, that they can then help in inadvertent ways, whether it be with funding, campaign donations, rigging system? Because it makes me, concerned that we have a gubernatorial race coming up here in California.
Yes, you do.
And I feel like, that could be a very important race. But we have other, other positions in California that also need to be changed, but it'll start with the governor's race. So, and we have a lot of candidates. I feel like there's probably close to 20 gubernatorial candidates that are running or more. What should we be concerned with that race?
I think you should ignore R's and D's.
Okay.
Especially in California, it's a jungle primary. Doesn't matter. They're just going to take whoever gets could be two Democrats. Whoever gets the two most number of ballot votes in the primary are going to be your two candidates. So that's the way California elections work. Let me just talk about that for a minute. In Montana, in the 2024 election, they have a state Senate consisting of 50 members, and the Republicans won 32-18. So they won a huge majority in the Senate of Montgomery, of Oregon. In the first week of their session that they held this year, their legislative session, 9 of the Republicans caucused with the Democrats. So they lost their majority. And how did those Republicans get elected? They weren't real Republicans. They were rhinos. They were rhinos, Republicans in name only. But they put an R in front of their name because they can't get elected in those districts as a Democrat because the people are Republican, the people are red. The problem is that the people don't know this. The people just vote for R or D.
Yeah.
And how does it happen that these candidates end up in the general election? It's not the general election where that's decided. That's back in the primary where that's decided. And so what happens is the grassroots will bring up a candidate that represents the population, but the establishment will bring up a candidate who they want. And they will run other, you see this all the time. They will pay for other campaigns to dilute the vote so that the establishment candidate maintains control. And they basically suppress the grassroots that way. So to me, that was a long answer to your question, but I'm showing you the people are not, their voices are not being heard. Their true voice is not being heard because the establishment is manipulating the primary. That's where all the action is. And so in this gubernatorial election that you're talking about, and by the way, the primary is in the spring is also when you vote for your school boards and your city councils and those, I think maybe the school board might be the most important race of all, but so I understand the emphasis on governor, but your school board races, man, think about it. The school boards in California, that's huge.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode I'm going to bring you back for. I think we should just drill down on that stuff.
That's huge.
Yeah.
But for in California, I know the gubernatorial race is a jungle primary, which means whoever gets the most votes, the top 2 vote getters, they're the ones who get to go to the. So what you need to do, what the conservatives need to do in California, since you are conservative, I'm a conservative too as well. My dad jokes. He says he's just a little bit right of the John Birch Society. That's what my dad says. And I inherited a lot of his ideology, so I'm very conservative. So what you need to do is to get behind one conservative candidate and make sure that they're at least first or second on getting the ballots. The problem right now is you've got a couple of Ds or a few Ds, and you've got gobs of Republicans. I know you got Bianco, Sheriff Bianco, and he's probably the lead opportunity you have.
Well, but you also have Steve Hilton, the Fox News guy, Fox News anchor. So it's like, who knows what kind of, financial backing these guys have.
Yes.
And we have some other great candidates that just don't have the money. Yeah. And so I'm trying to believe that there's something bigger that's going to help them keep up and to be able to make a difference in the grassroots level. But no, I agree with you. We're going to have to pick a solid conservative who's going to be running. I don't know. I don't feel like some of these bigger names on the conservative side or on the Republican side, like the Bianco and the Hiltons. I just don't know. Something is suspicious there to me.
Yes.
I'm very suspicious.
And a lot of those other people that are running, their campaigns are going to be paid for by the left. They want them to run because it dilutes the race. So it's like what you really. I learned this in Idaho. Like I said, I'm Johnny Appleseed, but I'm cross-pollinating. I learn a lot. In northern Idaho, there's 7 counties up there that are like, they want to separate from the state of Idaho and combine. I mean, they're very conservative. They have amazing party discipline up there. And what they basically do is if they have 3 Republicans running in the primary, they get them in a room and they say, okay, which one is it going to be? We're going to only run one.
I honestly feel like that's what we need to do here in California. Like we just had a Pastor Cheon from Southern California decide to go into the race, and he has tons of churches in his network, tons of Christians that are probably turn out for him. But we also have Daniel Mercury, who he's a Navy vet. He knows his Constitution in and out, his Bible in and out. He has all the characteristics in somebody that I would vote for. It's just he just doesn't have the financial backing. So it's like. I almost feel like we do need to get these guys into a room or girl. I don't know if there's any girls running yet, but we need to get these people in there, and we need to do some negotiating here.
All right, which one is it going to be, guys?
Yeah.
The problem with it is we conservatives is that we do things based upon principle.
Yeah.
And so my principle says I'm going to run, so I'm going to run. And you can't talk a guy out of his principle. So we shoot ourselves in the foot because of that. But party discipline, you have to decide, are we going to win or not? And our best chance of winning is to actually get position 2 or position 1. And that's not going to work if we've got 15 guys running. They're going to dilute
Well,
it.
there's a lot of egos. So there's a lot. I know more than half of these guys, and
Mhm.
they're strong alphas. So
Yep, there you go.
we got to figure. We got to figure something out. I got some people. I got some phone calls to make, but
We even at Rev 17, we had Lewis Herms there, and he's running.
Yeah, we had Lewis Herms, we
Yeah,
had
yeah.
Daniel Mercury.
I know
Yeah,
Daniel.
it was it was great. And I personally want to go, and I want to go meet with some of these men myself,
Yeah.
and see if we can prepare for whoever will be the winner on our side in the primaries, because we want them to know what we're doing, and so that way we have our local governments involved and the
Yeah.
people that we need there. So.
Mhm.
Dr. Frank, hey man, I just really appreciate you so much for coming into my life and just helping us with everything that we're doing. I know everyone loves you from our church, and the Peace of Heaven. We're going to do great things together, and I really
Looking forward
appreciate
to
what
it.
you've been doing for our country, because it's been needed for many years. So.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Matt. I'm looking forward to next time too. We only went through like 2 of our 5 bullet points, so we definitely need another.
So much more work to do.
Episode. Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so much more work. All right. Well, God bless you, Dr. Frank,
Thank you,
and
brother.
I will be in touch with you, and we'll get the next show scheduled.
Very good, my friend.
All right. We'll talk soon. All right. Bye-bye.
That is our obligation, to inform and alert the American people, to make certain that they possess all the facts that they need and understand them as well, the perils, the prospects, the purposes of our program, and the choices that we face.